So we're at the Great Art for Great Lakes, and what we do is every year we commission 5 artists to go through a series of participatory workshops to create an art piece that will be publicly installed in the area near the end of the year. So thank you all for being a part of this, and I will hand it over to our Gaggle 2020 artist, Paul.
Hi, everybody. Before we begin, I'm just going to start with a brief land acknowledgement. So let me start by acknowledging that as settlers, we're grateful for the opportunity to be here, and we thank the generations of people who've taken care of this land for thousands of years. Long before today, there have been Indigenous peoples who have been the stewards of this place in particular. We acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee, also known as the Iroquois people, or the Six Nations, including Mohawk, Oneida, Cayuga, Onondaga, Seneca, and Tuscarora. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. It's within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement and is part of the Haldimand Treaty Territory. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and Indigenous peoples have made, both in shaping and strengthening this community in particular, including our province and our country as a whole. As settlers, this recognition of the contributions and historic importance of Indigenous people must also be clearly and overtly connected to our collective commitment to make the promise and challenge of the truth and reconciliation real in our communities, in particular to bring justice to or for missing Indigenous women and girls across the country. So following that, I'd just like to also say thanks to Waterlution and Great Art for Great Lakes for choosing my project. And yeah, so just to introduce myself, my name is Paul Chartrand. I'm an artist in Dunnville. We're only a few blocks away from the Grand River, so it's a pretty special place. I'm originally from London, but my wife was born and raised here, so it's my home now, but it's not where I was raised. So in my practice, I engage with environmental issues usually by constructing sculptural life support systems that I populate with living plants. And that's something that I'll be doing with this project. Usually what I do is I repurpose objects and cultural signifiers like language, and I use them as habitats and conceptual support systems for the plants that I'm putting in them. By doing that, I try to change the original use of the objects and recontextualize them as a kind of a player in this new system, so almost as a new agent. Recently, I've been working a lot with growing text, so growing sprouts in the form of texts. I've been making these hydroponic sculptures in an assemblage kind of way, so taking different objects and putting them together like I was explaining, and then also different forms of drawing. So I use drawing as a kind of a wide brush to paint like different kind of mediums and different tools and different ideas. And most of the projects are influenced in some way by thinking about things sculpturally, so how you would interact with them in person. The plants and the natural elements that I involve in the projects, they all have power and agency of their own. And it usually shows itself by the ability to change the appearance of the work. Often those projects are dispersed in some way through viewer interaction. Either people can take parts of the project and plant them, or in the case of the text works, they can read them. And often with projects, there will be a harvesting component where the viewer can consume part of the project as well, which is especially important in the text pieces that I've been working on. And yeah, so like just working with plants, it's my hope that I can kind of meaningfully engage with their power and agency, but also their relationship with humans and other animals and objects and things like that. So, Alexis, if you can hear me, hopefully you can. If you could put some of the pictures of the work that I sent you. So we'll just kind of move through these. If anybody has any questions, I can't unmute you, but either you can or Alexis can. So we'll just kind of move through these briefly, spend a couple seconds with each one. This was a piece that I did in my undergrad. It was the first piece that I did with living plants. So if we can go to the next one. This was a garden made from repurposed containers, meant to highlight food insecurity in Guelph. This was right after my undergrad. This is a hydroponic coffee table that I made, and I was growing mint plants in it, and I was harvesting the mint to brew for tea that would be used as a kind of a conversation starter around the table. So the table and the plants inside kind of become part of this conversation. This one called Window, it was kind of a more of a whimsical piece that I made where a bonsai tree is watching a live feed of Algonquin Park and kind of looking at a video of its feral counterparts in the wild. This was one of my bigger projects that I did during my master's program at Western. So I basically made this big coffee growing machine out of an upturned dumpster. So repurposing an object that kind of symbolizes the waste stream to me in order to grow a plant that is also associated with the waste stream to me. Like I see coffee being like really embedded in this kind of flow of material and waste eventually. This is an example of one of my text projects. This was for Culture Days in London. This is a hydroponic grow tower. So we were growing corn, beans, and squash, which are the plants grown as part of this trio called the Three Sisters. This is just a detail shot. I like to show a lot of the components of the hydroponic system because I think it's important to acknowledge kind of the background information in a project. So things tend to look in the gallery like they're kind of haphazard, but I intentionally leave them uncovered so you can see kind of what's happening behind the scenes. And this image and the next image are both of a tent trailer that I converted into a small-scale tree farm. And the video above those seedlings there is documentation from different kind of interactions between humans and the forest, particularly the boreal forest. So there's things like camping and lumberjacks and firefighting and things like that to kind of expose the plants to what they might expect after they've been planted. This was one of my favorite pieces from my master's program. It's a balanced farmer side. And so as this bean plant grows up and over, it has to continually be readjusted so that it can grow in a way that's not going to tip the side. And this is just another living text project. The pigeons made short work of some of the letters. So I thought it was kind of fun how the text originally was supposed to say "eat the concrete." It was a part of an exhibition in Toronto, and the pigeons kind of helped rewrite the work almost. So some of the letters you can read quite clearly, and some of them almost turn into like a dash dot system like you would see in Morse code. So I thought that was kind of funny, but also frustrating. This was a piece that I did a year or two ago in Quebec. We used, this is another coffee-related piece, so we took a lot of plants indigenous to North America that can be used as coffee-like substitutes, and we grew them inside a shipping container. and I did some botanical drawings on cardboard and out of like a coffee-based ink. So just trying to show how this kind of system could be like a new alternative to coffee, which is becoming increasingly difficult to grow in certain areas because of climate change. And this is just an inside shot. We had some coffee bags inside. At the back, there's actual coffee plants, and in the front, there's things like chamomile and mint and lemon verbena and stuff like that. And this is one of my more recent projects that I did last year in Conestoga Mall, where we were growing 1,500 silver maple seedlings to try and cancel out what's projected to be my, like as a person born in the year that I was born, my contribution to CO2 emissions. And yeah, so if we can exit out of the sharing. Okay, perfect. So just to discuss the project a little bit up front. Oh, well, I guess first, is there any questions before we move forward to discuss like what I'm going to be working on for this? Okay. So just to talk a little bit about what my plans are, I'm going to be using traditional and scientific methodologies to develop a sort of a monument for water purification and remediation along the Grand River. So originally my intent was to pump water out of the river, filter it, and pump it back in, similar to one of my favorite projects by an artist named Hans Hake. But for logistical reasons, the county didn't really want me to have a piece with electricity, so I'm focusing now on runoff water. So it's a little bit more of a passive filter, but essentially what I'm going to be doing is using hundreds of cardboard tubes that will partly be contributed by a U-Haul. We're going to be filling these tubes with layers of filtering substrates, so different types of soil, gravel, sand, charcoal, and eventually they'll be planted with willow and different plants that help stabilize the soil. So essentially we're making a sort of a visual representation of a natural filter that already exists along the banks of the river, but the cardboard tubes will all be inside the hull of an aluminum boat, an aluminum fishing boat. So it'll bring these tubes together in a sort of sculptural monument near the banks. We're still waiting for approval, but what it's supposed to be, where it is supposed to be located is near Muddy, the Mudcat, over by Grandview Lodge. So I'm assuming most of the folks here are probably from Dunnville or around here, so they probably know where Muddy is. But yeah, so the boat will act kind of as a site marker and kind of as a way to differentiate between the surrounding area, because in a couple of years, a lot of the cardboard tubes will kind of dissolve and kind of meld in with the ground around, or that's the idea. And even though the call from Great Art for Great Lakes really focused on the Great Lakes, obviously, I saw the Grand River as like a limb of the lake, as sort of an appendage, and rivers just as parts of the body, the same body of water, and how they feed the lake and contribute to its health. And yeah, so if Alexis, if you want to show some pictures from the sketchbook, and after that I can kind of explain the participatory element that we're all here for. So in the order, there should be ones for this specific project. So I might have, yeah, so these are all pages from my sketchbook. Just to give you kind of an idea of the way that I write things down and take notes and brainstorm, because that's very much a part of what we're all going to be doing together. So if you stop on this image, Alexis, along the top, you'll be able to see version 1. The boat is kind of tipped at an angle, and the cardboard tubes are kind of laid out front. What I'd like to have happen is there be almost the form of a wake, coming out from behind the boat. So all of these tubes that we're going to be designing together will make these sort of subtle twin tail behind the boat and kind of catch water as it flows down the hill. And you can see, oh, there's the boat. Yep. Perfect. And I've got some willow branches in there, but those ones didn't take successfully, so I have to get replanting. So I believe the boat's about 12 feet long, and it'll be kind of sitting on an angle. Just as like an extreme kind of version of like when you see the boat skipping across the water, it'll be like at kind of full speed. And yeah, so if we can exit out of that now. Thank you. It's kind of fun where I can just say things and they happen.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah. So since we've all been like painfully made aware of the shortages of things like toilet paper rolls, I thought it'd be kind of fun and interesting to incorporate them directly into the project. And they're just super easy to get a hold of and stuff. So using the toilet rolls that I'm hoping people have been collecting or have been given from other people, we're going to work together to draw and write the ideas down from these workshops, like directly on the tubes. So I haven't designed a roll to show you. I brought a blank one because I really want everybody's examples of their own rolls to be like uniquely their own. I didn't want to like show you an example and it'd be like, oh, well, I have to copy that. Anything that you think is important about these presentations, I want you to write it down or make a note or sketch. I want you to treat them as like a notepad, essentially. So yeah, we're basically taking notes in presentations has been like proven through research to increase your retention rather than just listening in a passive way. So like actively engaging with lectures is always a better way to go. Obviously not just writing things down, but asking questions helps too. This workshop specifically is more of an introduction or a primer to the overall process. Later on, the following 3 workshops are going to specifically focus on the Grand River, ecology in rivers, and efforts to clean up the watershed. So we're going to have a lot of, or I am rather, we're going to have more guest speakers besides myself because it's more fun to have more voices in a conversation, and I'm not an expert in river ecology, but I really like learning about it. So yeah, I'm basically just trying to curate a list of speakers, and most of them are confirmed at this point. But I really want you to make as many notes as you feel are necessary. What we want to end up with ideally are these sort of records, like notebooks of your participation. The toilet roll is kind of we're going to talk about idea mapping shortly, but that's basically what we're looking for is idea maps, not necessarily just like writing down point for point the information that you hear, but think of the roles partly as being a sort of cyclical form of knowledge. So like the knowledge goes around and around. It doesn't necessarily stop on like one flat page. Like I mentioned earlier, the roles that you all design, if you're local, you can drop them off to me, or you can mail them as well. So basically, I'm going to be collecting the roles, and they'll all be incorporated into this public sculpture. So I'm hoping for like loads and loads of these roles. If we're short, which I'm sure we will because we need quite a lot, I'm going to be using these sort of longer tubes from my father, who works in textiles. So he has these really long tubes. So those will be some of the longer ones that you saw in the sketches. And we'll fill them up. Whoever wants to join me for the installation once the restrictions for COVID have kind of eased back. I see Lacey waving. It'd be great to meet people in person and have that all happen. Once the COVID restrictions are kind of loosened a bit, we're going to be filling them up with gravel, sand, and charcoal, like I mentioned. and it'll filter the runoff water. I'll describe the process a little bit more in detail in the next workshops. But yeah, basically we're looking mostly to use willow and a couple of different species that are really good ground cover to hold this mound together as the cardboard kind of melts and disappears into the ground. And I also just want to acknowledge that the name, the Grand River, like that's a settler name. The original name was the Willow River, which like you're gonna have to bear in mind with me because I don't speak Mohawk, but I would put the type up here so that if anybody did speak Mohawk, they could. But from what I have gathered, it's pronounced Ose Genhi Onhadadi, and I can send the type out for it later. But essentially, it translates to Willow River for the loads and loads of willows that grow on the banks. And okay, so now that we've got like a basic idea of what the project is, we're gonna watch a video that Alexis is gonna put up about mind mapping. And so Tony Bouzon is going to do a much better job than I at explaining the process of mind mapping and why it's important. And then we'll talk about some questions after.
Two. So let's look at how intelligence itself actually works. I'm going to ask you to imagine that you are a piece of equipment. You're a supercomputer. And I'm going to give you a piece of data, and I want you to check, what does your brain do? How long does it take to access it? What does the brain give it? And are there any colors or associations related to it? Are you ready? Piece of data I want you to access is mango. Okay, did you get, well, first of all, how long did it take you to access it? Yeah, and all of you are doing, what does that mean? That means instantaneous, microsecond, phenomenal. No supercomputer can do that from your infinite database. So if you work out how we do that, you'll get a Nobel Prize. And you'll get it just like that. So did you get a nice little MANGO printout? And all your heads going no. What did you get? Picture. A picture. How many of you got a picture or an image with colors and associations? Everybody. And I've done field surveys around the world. It's everybody. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the human race. Because this is how our brains actually work. Image. That could be anything, couldn't it? It could be your mum. It could be a mango. It could be an insect. Anything, the way the brain works. With radiant associations, colors, multiple sensories, linking out. So the two key words for which the brain works are this and this. Now, what do you think my personal main language is? Quickly. English, English, English. What's your personal language?
French.
French. English, Pakistani, lots of different languages. No, no. This is the human language. The human language is imagination and multiple sensory associations. That's the way we all speak. Prime. The other languages, verbal, are subroutine. Important, second routine. And that is the genesis of all creativity, all thinking, and that's how mind maps are generated as well. Here is an example. This is one study in America, Mexico, with young children and their creativity. And general creativities show that as people get older, creativity does what? Goes down. And everybody knows it, and all the studies prove it. And that is normal. However, that's the bad news. The good news is it is not natural, as you're about to see. One of the most moving and delightful moments of my life. This was a study done with these little children, and they were asked to generate as many ideas or uses for a paperclip they could think of in 10 minutes. This is the first example. This little boy, 10 minutes, he generated 4 ideas. 4 ideas. His researcher, the lady Amerique Jenkins, taught him for 1 hour only that radiant human language and thus mind maps. He had 1 hour lesson, and then he was asked the same question, how many can you think of? And he was thinking of an elastic band. How many uses for an elastic band? Same time, same paper, same fundamental equipment, same brain, 1 hour later, that's what he did. 22 ideas. And he got no more marks for anything else. But you look at those lovely little circles. What are they? They're his feet. Those are his little trousers. Those are his little hands. And what's that rising sun above the elastic band? That's his head. And when he did it, in the beginning of the first test, he was saying, I can't, I'm not very creative, vocally. When he did that, he looked up at the researcher and he said, I'm a genius. And he is. I mean, look at it. That's 1 hour before from the information age. 1 hour later from the intelligence age. And that mind map is a flower of intelligence. So all around the planet, there are these flowers of intelligence. And one flower is the real power. That is the power of intelligence, the power of you, the power of every brain on the planet. So that is really flower power. That's flower power. So let me just tell you a couple of stories and then conclude. First of all, the baby, and we'll talk about science. And you notice, by the way, that little mind map of the boy shows that intelligent thinking, mind mapping, radiant thinking, is egalitarian. It's egalitarian. It's the equal opportunity of every brain, every person on the planet to be brilliant, as indeed they are. So, science. What is a scientist? You all know that you're not a scientist, therefore you know what it is you're not. So what's a scientist? A scientist is not some weak person in a white lab coat in a dangerous, stinking laboratory. The scientist is a person who follows the experimental methodology. Hypothesis, an idea, the prediction that this may happen, the experiment. Then you get the result, you do the comparison, you make your conclusion, you have your summary, and then you continue to the next experiment. Babies are often written about as the real example of the fundamental aggressive or violent, destructive nature of the human being. May I have a piece of paper? I'm a baby. You've given me a piece of paper. You give me 2. Will you get this piece of paper back in this way? No. So what happens? In every country around the planet, male or female, this. What's the little baby?
Scientist.
Pure scientist. What is the engineering, mechanical, tensile strength of this material? Check it as a musical instrument. What is the social, economic value of this? Anybody want some? Stick it in the billion-faceted chemical laboratory. Not so good. Try the musical instrument, and then what? Throw it away onto the next experiment. How many of you were babies? How interesting. So now you're 3, 4, 5 years old and you're walking with mummy and daddy and there's a big puddle there surrounded by little and larger stones. What's the hypothesis in the 3, 4, 5-year-old child's brain? What's the hypothesis? Yeah, little stone, probably little splash. Pop. Correct. Next hypothesis? Bigger rock. Bigger splash. Let's try that. Bang! Yes. Third hypothesis is what? I'm bigger than that rock. Look at this. Wham! The big splash. Scientist. How many of you play around with your food? Interesting. Everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, how many of you are scientists? All of you. All of you. All experimenters. All childlike. And once upon a time, 15 minutes ago, you thought you weren't one. And so does the whole planet. And TED is a real intelligence agent in showing people who they really are. You're scientists. Imagine that the entire planet believes that. You're not poets. How many of you have written 1 or 2 poems in your life, little poems to mummy, daddy, grandpa, little animal, brother, sister, new lover, something painful, something happy? How many of you have written little poems? Everybody. How can you say you're not poets when you write poetry? You're obviously poets. How many of you are poets? All of you. So imagine spending the rest of your life as a poet and a daydreamer where that power lies. Power is what it is, isn't it? Powers. And that fires poetry, and imagination does. And my final story, and this is a sad but very informative. When I was younger, I was traveling in the underground behind a little girl and her mum. And the tube was going faster and faster, and for the first time in my life I thought, it's going to crash, it's going too fast. And as I first thought that, the little girl says to Mummy, Mummy, it's going so fast, we can go into tomorrow. And then we can tell Daddy what's going to happen. And I thought, wow. And as I thought that, bang! Don't do that. Don't do that again. That's stupid. Think properly. And there was a little 5-year-old girl, Einsteinian, and the daydream was crushed out. So around the planet we have crushed, we have shackled, we have restrained, we have trained inappropriately creativity and poetry. And you are all poets, you're all therefore artists, you are all scientists, you are all childlike. You are therefore going to be warriors of the mind, because that's what it's all about, isn't it? You're warriors of the mind and its beauty. And one of the perfect examples of that is the poet laureate Ted Hughes, who was one of my best friends, and his whole focus was to take all the children and show them that their imagination, that their daydreaming was everything that was important. And that's how they would grow. That's how they would become real humans. And they were all, by definition, poetic. So let me end waving my wand. This is far more powerful than Harry Potter's wand. This is the colors for the brain. All the colors you love and that will inform and ignite your brilliance. And Ted Hughes loved the poems about the eagle. And he thought of children as...
All right. So, like I said, Tony does a pretty good job of talking about some of these ideas, and what I really like about what he says in the video is to like really try and think of yourself as a scientist throughout this and an artist as well. Record everything you think of in this sort of branching way. So I know that he doesn't exactly go through the process of making a mind map. So does anybody have a question of like how you go about making that? We're going to have some picture examples in a couple minutes. When Tony asks for like you to imagine a mango, like how do you see it? Do you see it as a picture first? Do you see like, do you taste it? Do you smell it or hear it? I think those are all things that are important to consider. So, and the way that I look at mind mapping is it really bolsters the creativity that was evident in that little boy's drawing. So it helps you visualize the connections between things. So you maybe start with this central concept. So like next week, we're going to be talking about the Grand River, but we're also going to be talking about like the history of the Grand River. We're going to be talking about the demographics. We're going to be talking about the environment. So you have these branches that come off of the central idea, and then these smaller branches that come off of that. So part of the reason that I wanted to include mind mapping in the participatory part of this project is because I think that visually mind maps, and you'll see pictures in a couple seconds here, you see, or I see anyway, roots and waterways and mushroom mycelium, and you see natural forms in these images, which I think is perfect for this project. So Alexis, if you want to bring up some of those pictures. So this is the first one. It just kind of shows what I was talking about. So we start with this central idea, and then each topic is kind of a branch off of that, and then you have the sub-ideas that come out of that. So this is a very clinical, basic kind of version of a mind map, but if we go to the next couple of images, you'll see just how personal and creative they can get. So because of this project being a water filter, we want to see mostly materials like charcoal and graphite. You can do some colored pencil as well, but just because I'm putting it in the ground, we really want to try and avoid things like paint, certain types of ink. So you want to really stick to things that are like based in kind of natural, I mean, that's a terrible word to use, but like natural materials. So charcoal, natural inks you can make, natural pigments, graphite, anything like that, chalk. And I know that some of this stuff might smudge, but it's not a huge idea for everything to remain perfectly legible. The main thing about this activity that we're all doing together is to help you remember the information that we're going to be going through. So it's less about the product that you're going to be making and more about retaining the information. So if we want to move on to the pictures of the roots and things, so you
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks. Maybe this is premature. Maybe you're getting to this, but on the toilet paper rolls, are you hoping that we will do the mind map there or on paper prior to doing something else on the toilet paper rolls?
No, so the toilet paper rolls are going to be our medium. So we'll be using the toilet paper rolls as sort of our sketchbooks and our notepads. And I mean, if it's something that you'd like to see kind of a record of, I would just before you bring them back, I would just recommend like taking some pictures. Yeah, that's kind of my recommendation. But these are going to be our primary sketchbook for the project.
So the mind maps go on the toilet paper rolls.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thanks. I'll mute myself again.
No worries.
No, it's okay. I've got a dog and things going on.
Okay.
So. Thank you.
No problem. Does anybody else have any questions? We'll just show the last couple pictures of those natural forms there, Alexis. So this is a picture of some roots with mushroom mycelium as well. So that's a pine seedling, but some of the fuzz you see around the roots, that's actual mushroom material. So you don't see the fruit of the mushroom above the ground, but those are kind of like mushroom roots, and they act alongside plant roots to help absorb nutrients that the plant can't get naturally. So if we go to the next couple, you can see how these communities of roots come together, and you see these different ideas kind of branching together and interlacing. And that's really how ideas work in the brain too. So in the next, after the next image or two, there's some pictures that I have of neurons in the brain as well. Alexis, if we can move to the next one. And the next one. Yeah. So this is a real close-up of mushroom networks underground. So these are like microscopic, but you can see the similarities. Some of these things look like maps when you look right down from overhead. And next. And there we go. That's an electron microscope scan of, or no, that's a CAT scan, I think, of activity in the brain as the different synapses are firing. But like you can see the connections between these different visuals. And that's a different kind of scan. And then there's one at the end, and I think it's the last image. Oh, maybe I didn't send it. Anyway, there's a CGI one, but I might not have sent it or labeled it properly. But these kind of images can just kind of give you an idea of kind of the forms that you might expect. Some people come up with more of a funnel. So you have this picture and it looks like you've kind of sprayed it across the page. Some people, it really is more of a web, but it's really a personal thing. And I encourage everybody to do their own approach. And yeah, for me, that's pretty much all I have for this session. But over the next 3, like I said, we're going to be joined by different people to discuss the Grand River and river ecology. We're going to have people from the GRCA. I'm still trying to line someone up from Six Nations to join us, but I have some requests out, and there's going to be Dan from the Thompson Creek Eco Center joining us, and a poet friend of mine from Guelph. And yeah, so we're also hoping potentially to expand this a little bit to partially in person, depending on where things go with the social distancing recommendations. So I think that part of this process, Alexis, is for people to submit their emails, correct?
Yes, so if you have registered, which I'm sure you all did, that's how you got the link, I have your emails. So I'll just be sending a follow-up email once we conclude and getting in touch with all of you. Did you need the emails, Paul?
Well, what I was hoping for is maybe I can forward you my notes so that people can see. I have a list of some further resources for mind mapping, just so that you can have a more in-depth idea of like a how-to. But again, try and not be too rigid about it. There's also some videos in that list as well. So I'll send that to Alexis, and Alexis will send it out to all of you.
Would
So,
you, hey Paul,
yeah,
can I ask a question?
this is more of an overview workshop, but the next ones will be more interesting.
Can I ask you, Paul? Do you have any samples of the cardboard tubes that you've already mind mapped on?
No, I did. I'm planning on doing one for the next session, but I wanted to leave this one really open-ended for everybody, so that they could start without my influence. But I'll be doing one to kind of act as a guide and show you how I'm not just making all of you do my work for me. Yeah, I'll have my own example for the next one. And that way too, I can do a shorter roundup at the beginning. So if people miss this session, I'll still give a brief explanation of what we're doing, but it'll mostly be discussions about river ecology and stuff.
Yeah, I'll be curious, like if people are that when they do their mind map on their tube, if they were cool with sending in any photos of them. Is that
Yes, please.
Yeah, that'd be. I think I'd love to see what everyone's doing. I know I'm going to do one. I think Alexis is going to do one.
Yeah.
Then
I've got 2 roles.
Is there like a social media hashtag that people could use, like if they do it on Instagram or something?
Yeah, sure. Like we could use just simply like Gaggle 2020, or if you want something more specifically like hashtag toilet paper rolls with Paul or something like, but Gaggle 2020 is kind of a short and sweet one. And then I could share it really easy on our social media.
Yeah, let's stick with that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because in the follow-up email I'll be sending, I'll have links to our social media so you can follow along and send stuff to me. You'll have my email. It's really great because we're all online. Like having visual representations like that is so good to show and share. And yeah.
I don't know if Sue is trying to say something. Sue, give us a thumbs up if you're trying to say something.
Wait for it.
Oh, there, I unmuted you.
Okay, I'm sitting in my garage, and when the mind mapping guy came on, Tony, was it?
Yeah.
A neighbor walked by and decided to talk to me all through it. So could you just put the link for, is there a link for that? Could you?
Yeah, so I'm gonna send my notes to Alexis and she'll send them out to everybody.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll get the link and I'll have to rewatch it inside, but it is nice outside too. So.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Okay, great, thank you.
I'm grateful to everybody for joining us, by the way. Like, I know it was rainy this morning, but it's kind of cleared up somewhat. So just thanks to everybody for coming. And I know Fridays aren't usually the best, so.
Yeah, thank you all so much. And thank you so much to Paul. Oh,
I have one last question. Sorry.
Yeah, Jennifer?
Yeah, sorry if I'm really didn't catch this earlier.
No.
But is there one word in particular that we're starting with as the theme for the mind map, as in mango, for you?
Well, for me, it's all centered around the Grand River.
Right.
But, like it doesn't necessarily have to start in the same way for everybody. It could just be river in general, or it could be willow. But those are some of the main ideas that we'll be talking about. Like I'm really focused on the Grand River specifically, but some of the ideas are just as applicable to other rivers and like water filtration and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It'll be a little bit more obvious at the beginning of the other workshops, like what the major concepts that we're talking about are. So this one it's a little bit more general, but yeah.
great. Any other?
Jenny?
Are we doing one of the toilet paper rolls for today?
You can if you'd like. That's why I'm sending a couple more videos out, kind of as practice runs. So if you'd like to do some practice ones just about like how to mind map and working your, like do some practice rolls basically, there's 2 more TED Talk videos about mind mapping. And there's also at the very bottom of my notes, there's a website like just dedicated to helping you understand like how to mind map and different ways of doing it, because it really is a very diverse practice. And the pages that you saw in my sketchbook, they aren't necessarily like a central bubble with other bubbles around them. It's more like this idea points, like arrows are my favorite thing to use in my sketchbook because I just link different ideas, and it shows how your mind flows, essentially, is what we're looking at, because like we're talking about the flow of the river and the flow of your thinking. Yeah, I know some of this sounds like wishy-washy, but I
Not at all. Not at all.
I just like how
Great.
everything is connecting, and like just visually seeing those pictures at the end, I think ties it all in.
Do you have any other questions?
Oh, I think Sue might be talking again.
No? Oh, I'm trying to unmute. It's not letting me unmute.
Hold on, Sue.
Oh no. No, thumbs
Oh,
down.
no.
Okay, weird that I can't unmute. Sorry about that, but
No, it's okay. She's giving the thumbs down. She does.
Next time I won't sit in the garage.
Okay.
Too many distractions. Oh, besides that, I'm one of those people. Squirrel.
Squirrels are cute.
Yesterday it was fire.
It's hard for me to read my notes and also look at everybody, so it's really helpful to have Alexis like virtually raising people's hands and unmuting them. So in the next session, if you do join us, just you can unmute yourself and like break in at any point too. So yeah, I'm trying to leave things. Obviously, this one ran pretty much the whole time, but I'm trying to leave things open so that we can have more of a discussion. So
will future workshops be held at the same time on Fridays?
no, so
Okay.
just because Fridays, now that the weather's starting to get, I mean, today is a bad example, but the weather's starting to get better, so we're going to be talking about better days.
Okay.
So not sure whether it'll be in the afternoon or the evening, but I'm hoping to just have it on a day that's more practical for people. So for me, that might be a Tuesday or a Wednesday, but and I realize that it won't always be practical for everybody to join, but spread the word. And
Okay, you'd like us to have more people come? Would you like us to invite more people?
yeah, like
Yes.
it'd be great to have more voices as part of the conversation. So
Okay.
And
I was
then-
there was a bag on my porch today, and I was hoping it was the wine fairy. It was the farting fairy. She dropped off toilet paper rolls. So I
I
have
have a question.
to share.
well, I think that's all for me. Unless anybody has any more questions.
I have to run right now. Thank you. I'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks
Steve.
for joining. Okay, yeah, thank you everyone so much. And thank you so much to Paul for putting this together and thinking this through so deeply and having all of these great examples and resources. That's so helpful for everybody. And I know it'll be helpful for me as well as I do my toilet paper rolls as well. So thank you. And I'll be sending the follow-up notes and from Paul and some info. And I'm also including a link to our exit survey, which I'm sure a few of you, if you've joined us for other Gaggle workshops, you've been told about the exit survey, but it really is important to us to kind of collect those responses and send them off to Waterlution. So if you just take a couple minutes to fill that out, we'd really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Be safe.
Yeah.